Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome once again to the 16th International Conference on the Safety of Children and Young People in the Internet. Let me welcome those of you who joined offline, namely in this room and online. This is the last session of today, but not the last thing that we are going to see today or watch. Currently, we are starting our debate. Namely, an expert debate on overusing the internet, and then we'll have a documentary played to watch on a similar topic. Namely, we'll watch the Screen Out movie. This will be available both to the offline and online attendees. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we would like to talk about a subject that is widely discussed, especially post-pandemic. Namely, let's talk about whether dependency or overuse is changing, is decreasing or increasing. But let me introduce our special guest, Wojciech Pinkowski, who is a student of the primary school number 52, number 2, sorry, in Mrozy. Wojtek, please join us and let's applaud. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to invite Mrs. Bogna Białecka, psychologist, the head of the Edukacja Zdrowotna and Psychoterapia Foundation. Mrs. Anna Kochanowska, a psychologist, certified psychotherapist of the Polish Psychological Association, and a therapist of children and young people, including the psychotherapy of addiction. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Rafał Lange, the head of a team focusing on the market in NASK.
Witam Państwa.
Ladies and gentlemen,
bardzo serdecznie dziękuję, że Państwo pozytywnie
thank you so much for accepting our invitation.
Myślę też, że ten temat został już dzisiaj de facto trochę wprowadzony, bo i w prezentacji profesora
has been introduced both in the presentation of Dr. Zemski and also the presentation of Professor Smachel. And the topic of today's debate is a complex one. We frequently discuss overuse of internet as well as addiction to internet or dependency. So I would like to ask Anna about the problem as perceived by a psychotherapist. What about alarming signs? When can we talk about a problem?
Ja zacznę od trochę takiego wstępu.
I'll start with a short introduction, if I may, about what our work looks like in the office. A parent comes as a legal guardian with his or her child, for instance, a teenager. And the talk can start in different ways. So first of all, the parent can have his or her child diagnosed from the very start. And secondly, there are alarming signs brought by parents, and the problem arises during the discussion. If we know that a teenager overuses the internet, we debate on the reasons, and we discuss the period during which these signs have been appearing. The overuse of internet is rarely isolated. It appears in an emotional and family as well as school context. And this is what we have to pay attention to. Subsequently, we develop a therapeutic plan. That is what it looks like. You also asked about signs, symptoms. True. This is a question that we get very often via different channels. And it also is a question asked by therapists and educators. So what are the alarming signs telling us that something's wrong? First and foremost, for us therapists and psychologists, these signs come from parents most frequently. So the parent actually tells us that something is alarming. The situation is different, or appears different for the teenager, who are less aware. Parents report problems with waking up, and the problem arising, the problem being quite troublesome for both sides, namely parents and children, etc. When it comes to older children, for instance, going alone on their own to school, these children sometimes don't appear during the first classes because they would stay up late browsing the internet. Sometimes these are daily absences. This is what parents bring to us. And this is what they can observe in their family lives. Parents report grades dropping almost always, very frequently. And apart from that, there are also emotional symptoms. If we have a child who protests, who expresses anger when they no longer can browse the internet, or when the child isolates, this is also an alarming sign. So let's say we have a child isolating themselves from parents, being locked in the room. And the third group is composed of teenagers who change their social behaviors. This relates to teenagers who spend more time online than with their peers. And he or she is gaming, engaging in chat conversations, etc. Cameras are rarely used. Usually teenagers verbalize, and this is the only thing that they use. All right. So this is what parents can report, or guardians. What about young people? You told us that it's usually the surrounding that informs us about something problematic. What about teenagers? When do they see the problem? This is a very interesting question. There comes a moment when we talk with the teenager and they report different problems. They say that few things make them happy, that they have problems focusing, that they don't have energy to do anything. So they actually report on their mental state changing. They sometimes report anxiety and depression symptoms. So they are afraid of being with their peers, or in extreme cases, sometimes they are afraid of even going out of home. So they report an emotional state. Thank you so much.
Teraz chciałbym skierować głos do naszego żywego doradcy.
I would like to give the floor to our young advisor, Wojtek,
trudne zadanie bycie głosem.
Who has a very difficult task of being a portparole for young people during today's conference. What is your opinion?
Twoi rówieśnicy często
You and your peers
takim narzekaniem.
frequently are faced with adults complaining that children are constantly browsing through their phones and perhaps they should just drop it and go play in the playground. This has become some sort of a ritual. What do you think? Do children overuse screen and in the internet?
Yes, I think it's a real issue. I can see it every day. I even have this friend. Okay, let me start over. Let me start from TikTok. I have uninstalled TikTok like 3 weeks ago, and when I see my brother watching it, I think it's really making you more stupid. It's like a trendsetter. This is what the teenagers mainly talk about. My peers. Now there is something with a loom. I'm not really sure what's that, but I have this friend, and since I have uninstalled TikTok, then we really have nothing to talk about, nothing in common, because it really impacts your personality a lot. Like you spend your 80% of the time on TikTok or Instagram. You just keep scrolling and scrolling, and it never ends. And you keep getting dopamine shots in your brain, and you cannot really focus on one thing. For example, there is this 1 hour-long video, and 80 to 90% of teenagers are not able to watch it, to focus on one movie or to watch a game for 60 minutes. They need to have the mobile phone in their hand all the time, and they have to be online all the time. Yes, as we've heard, it's not a problem only of teenagers, but we're focusing on the juveniles here. But you've said one interesting thing. You have uninstalled TikTok. That's the decision you've made. But you said it was also not easy because the trends keep changing all the time. So maybe 3 weeks later, you will not be able to understand something, or you haven't seen something. So it's a difficult path that you took. So would you recommend it to others to do the same thing? Or maybe you see some other attitudes to have some control over what you are doing over how you are using your smartphone rather than having your smartphone controlling you. Yes, for example, TikTok and Instagram. On TikTok, you can skip those videos which are not relevant and to go to something that you really want to watch. Like you're interested in soccer, so you will watch the videos related to soccer and skip the other. Of course, some people are smart enough to use the algorithms of those applications. They have several accounts and they post almost the same videos just to attract attention. And there is a man who is 20 or 25 years old who started 10 different accounts. And they were named like money.tips.uk. And he would post some videos that are supposed to be advice, and he's making about $10,000 a month on that, because everybody's interested in what he posts. Okay, so we can see that there is some fight for attention. Some people are using algorithms and applications to grab the attention or even scam others. But other people are trying to maintain some common sense. So now a question to Bogna. It's a follow-up of what I have asked before. I'm following up on the question that I asked to Wojtek. In education, I think we have a problem how to talk about it. This is something we are working on in our foundation too. It's very easy to fall into the extremes. You know, juxtaposing the fight of generations. We didn't used to have that, and now they have this. Well, parents also tend to use their phones a lot, not just the children. So what's the advice? How to stay reasonable in what you are communicating? I'm going to start a bit differently, but I remember when I talked to this lady several years ago, and she worked for a number of years in a center for young people who had some addictions from drugs and other things. And she shared this reflection that among the young people who have gone out of the addiction, those were the people who were asking questions. They wanted to find out what's going on in their brains, what's going on in their life, and which makes them react in a certain way. And that was an inspiration to me. I thought, what if we start to explain in what's happening in a person's brain when you are gaming or using TikTok or using the social media? And it turned out to be a great pattern. Wojtek mentioned dopamine, and this is really good when the youth learn about the reward system, how dopamine affects your body and so on. They are really interested in learning that. And the teenagers want to be independent, want to have some freedom. So the moment when you realize that you could become a slave of your own smartphone, which will rule every aspect of your life, and it will decide when you check your Instagram account because you will get a message. So this sort of makes you lose control over your life, because there is this thing, not even a person, but a device that's starting to control me and my reactions. I think this is the moment when people start making those good decisions. So congratulations on your decision, giving up on TikTok. And about a year ago, I was on the train, and there was a group of young adults. I think they were students, 18, 19 years old, and they were talking a little bit between themselves, using their mobiles. And there was just one girl who was reading a book. And at one point, she was asked, listen, why are you reading this book, actually? she said, well, it's just nice and it's interesting. Okay, but nobody called you? Nobody texted you? And she said, no, I have just uninstalled all the social media on my phone, and I'm just using my desktop to access my accounts, and then I have nothing to distract me. And the people started discussing how revolutionary it was, what a great step it is to get rid of Instagram from your smartphone. So, to conclude on my lengthy utterance, I would like to say that it's good to take the youth seriously, because young people really want to learn something serious about themselves, about how they function, and we should remember that we all want to be free, we don't want to be enslaved, and we want to make some decisions about if we want to live under the rule of a device, or do you actually want to have some power over your device? Yes, I think this is a value we could build on, but there are also different strategies. It's hard to uninstall everything. Maybe it's more about strategies of controlling the use. I haven't mentioned that, but I will say it now, that you might have been preparing your questions, so we hope we have some time left for Q&A during the discussion. You can use this Ask a Question button in our live transmission. So I hope we are going to receive some questions from the audience. And now I would like to turn to Rafał Lange. So now I will ask you something different. At NASK, you were conducting quite a lot of research recently about those issues. And I think this one is quite difficult to study because it's so multi-layered. But are you able to say what's the scale of this problem among young people? Are there any trends over time? We've talked a little bit about that, but what does your research show? First of all, thank you for inviting me here. The people in our team of polls and market research at NASK that has been researching not just the teenagers but also other age groups in the population and their digital behaviors. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my knowledge from my primary research and also from the review of other researchers' studies, because we have a lot of informational noise and the data doesn't always get to the recipients. So we are trying to use this ASAPS 18. This is a tool to study problem use of the internet. I'm going to talk what we understand by that, because this is a very interesting notion that sheds some light on what is going on nowadays. According to this test, 1/3 of the population requires some intervention. It could be an intervention from a parent, a psychologist, an advisor. 3 to 4 people per 100 require a therapy. So 1 in 3 teenagers in Poland requires an intervention due to problem use of the internet. So what we have at the back of the head, this is a dependency, but in academic setting we tend not to use the term dependency, because if we establish that a smartphone can cause dependencies and it's bad for your health, then somebody could raise a hand and say, so why don't we treat smartphones such as other substances like alcohol or nicotine? And academics, just as film stars, sports people, athletes, are dependent on the people who sponsor them, right? So that's one thing. Another thing I wanted to say is that we are talking about this problem as if we were discussing a leaking roof. So what kind of bucket we should put? So should it be plastic bucket or a porcelain bucket of 5 to 10 liters? But the roof is still leaking. A single parent or an individual parent or an individual teacher has no chance to stand up against the algorithms of social media. So we cannot compete against the positive stimuli from social media. No chance. We can discuss it here today, but on the other hand, we have crowds of psychologists, experts who want to improve the social media so that young people spend more time in there. So we don't have a chance against them. So I want to make a sociological digression here. Most of the Polish society come from the country. So in our minds, we know that the village brings up your child. Yeah? So it takes a whole village to raise a child. So we sort of leave it to the micro-community to raise a child. We have researched parents' attitudes in terms of this digital parenting recently. So the parents say it's up to the experts, to the psychologists, to the government, but not up to the parents. All the parents can do is talk to the child or forbid them to do something. The parents oftentimes don't understand the nature of the tool, because to parents, the smartphone is like the Swiss pocket knife. This is a tool that can be used in various contexts. So check the timetable, buy something. But for a child, this is their social space. This is used for auto-presentation, to make relations, to build autonomy, to build their sense of freedom, to build the sense in many aspects. So the parents should be helping them to build this nomos, so make sense of what the child is encountering now and what they will encounter later in life. So what's the meaning of life? Is it to avoid suffering? And does suffering make sense? And now the parents give up on this, and they think it's somebody else's job, and they give this right to the meta level. So there is some person from Australia, from the US, from another part of the world who can raise my child via the smartphone. So explain the meaning of life to them. Yesterday, I was talking about an article that was published in an Australian paper in Sydney Herald. That was an account of a task force that was combating pornography that contains depiction of children. So what they found is that the officers oftentimes go to some households, and it's really like a raid. They smash the door and they say, what's going on with their child? Why is their video online? Why are there pictures online? And the children who are 6, 7, or 8 years old, they actually produce pornography on their own, because that's an understanding that was imposed on them by somebody else, not the parents.
The parents became absent. Let me interrupt you, because there are many topics you touched upon. And we will have the chance to discuss sexual risk behaviors tomorrow. So actually, I'm trying to detangle all the tangled topics and now ask Anna about the very same topic. Namely, the results of screening tests, studies show that a large percentage of young people
na przykład właśnie szkolnych pedagogów, psychologów, nauczycieli, a pani takiej pomocy udziela. Chciałem spytać, kiedy myślicie,
or deal with the problem of referring to the psychologist or not. So my question is, when is support needed? When is help needed?
Po pierwsze, każdorazowo, kiedy dziecko
First of all,
zgłasza taką potrzebę.
every time when the child reports a need to talk to a therapist or a psychologist,
Zgłasza to
to parents,
pedagogowi,
to teachers,
my dorośli musimy traktować to bardzo
we
poważnie.
adults have to treat these situations very seriously.
Rodzina obserwuje takie niepokojące objawy.
Apart from that,
To, że dziecko
seeing alarming signs such as, for instance, the child reporting
spanie, że zgłasza
insomnia,
bolowanie głowy,
headaches,
trudności w skupieniu się na lekcji, czy
attention focus problems,
kartkówek czy spraw.
problems with preparing for
Zaczyna
tests.
się izolować i
When there is isolation,
bardzo ostrożni, uważni.
then we have to be very careful and very aware of what's going on.
Miał do tej pory kontakty bezpośrednie, nagle z nich rezygnuje.
Apart from this, situations when teenagers start isolating
Wiąże do tego, co pan
and shifting away from social interactions. This is also very alarming.
nam też terapeuta.
Now, what my predecessor said is quite important, and all that you touched upon
Jak leczyć,
shows
tak?
us,
Czy jak udzielać
psychologists,
pomocy, ma takie podłoże badawcze, czyli nie, że my
that there is a scientific background to what we are doing in practice.
Trudności z
Namely,
takim nadużywaniem
that problems with internet overuse
biorą się z pewnych też predyspozycji, o których
come from
to znaczy, że wiemy, że jeżeli
being predisposed to that.
mentalną jak
So, if you're impulsive, for instance,
predyspozycję do wchodzenia w
you can have a tendency
o krok dalej w uzależnienie.
to become addicted or dependent.
W reakcji, to
Therefore,
może mieć
an impulsive child
gratyfikacji,
can have problems with putting off gratification, and the internet itself gives instant gratification. Therefore, it stands in competition with other forms of gratification.
Drugi obszar takich cech, które mogą predysponować do wystąpienia
Apart from that,
uzależnień, nadużywania i uzależnień, to są takie czynniki związane
traits that can predispose to being addicted refer to the bond,
Tutaj badania mówią o tym,
to attachment.
że są osoby o stylu więzi unikającej, czyli to są takie dzieci, takie
Dismissive people, avoiding attachment style predisposes
fantazji,
to
wyobrażeń, więc sieć też
developing an internal world where we isolate.
znakomitą na to odpowiedzią. I co ciekawe, osoby o unikającym stylu
Avoiding style is also associated with too much shame, with excessive shame, pathological shame, and therefore someone who isolates himself or herself
my jako dorośli mamy takie zadanie,
should actually face
pomóc tej osobie dostarczyć jej
the challenge of engaging into correct relations, and we as the society should help this person, because shame is proportional to isolation,
który może wpływać
a factor that can contribute to dependency,
znaczy trudności w relacjach z najbliższymi, z rodziną.
Lies in difficulties in relations with family.
Jeżeli tam źle się dzieje, to dziecko automatycznie
Family problems translate
dużą siłę
into the possibility of the child isolating themselves.
Bardzo ważne, żeby wiedzieć, prawda, że to zwykle jest jakieś tło, jakiś kontekst.
Yes, this is very important to know that there is a broader context.
Kontekst rodzinny i pewne predyspozycje.
A family context.
I być może sytuacja tak w danej
as well as situations
te relacje.
and personal tendencies.
A z drugiej strony właśnie ta technologia, która
On the other hand, we have the technology that is being constructed, designed in a way to attract our attention. We talked about control and auto control. Wojtek, you deinstalled TikTok. But he also told us a couple of words about the overload of information. So the question is, would you have any piece of advice on how to deal with information overload, constant notifications that appear, for instance, in social media? How to use that consciously?
No to przede wszystkim pomijać takie nietreściwe.
First of all, you should skip contentless information, meaningless information, something that doesn't interest us.
Kiedy jesteśmy powiedzmy w szkole,
let's say we're at school or we are doing something that we want to focus on.
Nie przeszkadzać albo gotowy na telefon.
I think that we could enter the plane mode.
Odinstalować TikToka albo
or actually press do not disturb.
Trzeba chcieć po prostu.
You have to gain control over what you're doing. It can be done. It's not the easiest, but it can be done. So it's basically about not watching something that doesn't make sense for us. Yes, that will be also the topic of a documentary that we are going to see. How to deal with certain challenges. Our smartphones themselves have tools, for instance, do not disturb, or there is the plane mode. Namely, there are tools that we are equipped with and we can use in order to gain control. At the same time, the knowledge about them is not that common. Bogna, what other pieces of advice for parents and for children would you have on how to act?
Takie porady, co robić.
Well, advice is something that appeared in each and every presentation during this conference. Starting with what Professor Napiórkowski said, namely planning. What do I want to do? What do I want to devote my time to? Online, of course. So I plan and I stick to it.
To, co na pewno warto, to jest po prostu poznać te
apart from this, knowing the mechanisms of what is going on in our head, in our body, namely the reward system, something that can be tricked by the internet, namely informing our brain that we are doing something super nice and then stimulating. This is yet another thing, just as a keyword. And then deregulating the biological clock. This is yet another thing that I can mention by using smartphones or gaming. When we know these mechanisms, when we know what's going on inside our body, we become powerful enough to set our own rules. And I think that the young people excel in it. Well, we have programs such as Prawo jazdy smartfonem or Postromić cyfrowego tygrysa, which refer to the control over one smartphone, for instance. In these programs, during the workshops, people come up with advice, and there is a huge list of pieces of advice that people come up with. Now, later on, when we have all these pieces of advice, we tell people to select a piece of advice for themselves. And most frequently, people say that they have to put a smartphone off when going to sleep. So basically, I'm not sleeping with my smartphone. I'm not actually holding it until my hand drops because I'm so sleepy. That is what people select. And actually, I would like to point out your attention to the intuition of young people. If young people see someone misusing a smartphone or another device, they basically come up with the idea, I don't want to be like that person. So coming back to boundaries and to limits, if we threat or if we bring too much fear into the discussion about smartphones, people declare actually completely switching off and going off grid when it comes to smartphones and internet use. And actually, I dream about it a lot. But actually, being aware and avoiding risks constitute a very ambitious task. So actually, you have to come up with the rules that give us advantages and help us to reduce risks. I could see Wojtek smile when we talked about changing something. Well, I can talk about my brother. I won't mention my brother. I don't want any trouble. Sorry. So things happen, right? I'm using my smartphone now, actually, to see your questions and your remarks. You can also raise your hands if you have any questions. And we will give you a microphone. There is a question to Professor Rafał Lange. You mentioned social media working very hard to be able to focus to get our attentional focus. There is a question. Is there an ethical code for these institutions? Well, code can be brought down to the number of zeros in your bank account. All right, let's have another question. We were talking about the fear of missing out, namely a phenomenon of constantly wanting to check notifications or to check information, check whether there are no text messages or anything else, and that appeared during the Ukrainian presentation. No one mentioned it. Is it a current problem? Would you like to comment on that? FOMO is a result of what we are talking about, namely the problematic use of smartphones. Or games. It used to be about games. We have to be aware of the fact that a smartphone is a specific device. We are the representative of a slightly older generation.
Socjalizowany, zwłaszcza jeżeli chodzi o socjalizację pierwotną, czyli wtedy, kiedy jeszcze tego
and we were socialized, at least in the primary sense, in the original sense, or when we were kids, we socialized quite a lot of time ago, and we were introduced to smartphones at a different age than young people. There are studies, and I can't quote, whose results show that basically a smartphone is like a phantom limb to young people.
So if you take it away, it's like they are missing a limb. Some of the millennials touch their smartphones more often during the day than their own face. We have also some research that was done by a food manufacturer. Let's say it's a restaurant chain, and they were studying why do young people prefer to order online rather than coming to the restaurant in person. And somebody responded, because you have less direct interactions then. And that was actually the most common response. So we're coming back to what Anna was saying, relations, sometimes some social anxiety. It might seem that it's about how you order your food, but it seems that it might be much deeper than that. Okay, and do we have any questions or comments from the audience? Oh, I can see Ania raising her hand. Yes, I have a question to Wojtek. First, when did you get your smartphone first? And do you think that people can be 13 years old and live without a smartphone, you know, and keep having friends, have a place to go after school? I got my first mobile phone when I was in the 3rd grade. And the second question, well, it's kind of tough because I don't use the social media that much, but living completely without a smartphone would be really hard. If you were just this one person who got disconnected because everybody else communicates in your school group, everything is in there, and so on and so forth. So this is this FOMO, fear of being left out of the group. This is one of the main reasons, I think, why young people, and not only young people, use the social media, because you want to be in touch, you want to have a common topic and not to be an outcast. Thank you for the question and for the answer. Looks like we have one more hand in the air. I have a question, and I know that you have responded to it at least vaguely since the morning, but let me say that I'm here in 3 roles. I'm a parent, I'm a teacher, and I'm a journalist. Everybody's looking at me. Maybe you don't know me as a journalist, but I will focus on my work as a teacher. So my question is to our colleagues, psychologists and psychotherapists. So a short way to ask that would be, what can I do as a teacher or a mother to a child who has some risky internet use patterns? So what can I offer them in return? Do you know what I mean? Because I'm teaching higher grades. I think I'm on good terms with young people, and oftentimes when I talk to them, Krzysztof, you come to school and you are with your screen all the time, and they tell me, okay, but what can I do instead? And as an adult, I understand them. I see their point. What would I tell them? Go outside? I come from Pruszków, and I wouldn't recommend going outside in my neighborhood. But it's a serious question. What can we offer them instead as adults? What we can offer to children being adults is working in parallel. So the first part of this work is maintaining good direct contact. So if you want to talk to a child, maybe it's not the best idea to start the conversation from asking them, how are you doing at school? How are your grades? This is what adults usually do. It comes sort of automatically, but it's counterproductive. It doesn't build relations. My impression is that we, as adults, should consider whether we do have the space to listen to children. We often ask them questions, but we are not really focused on what we want to hear. Do you really want to hear what the child has to say? Do you want to look at their body language? Do you maintain eye contact, or do you do 5 different things at the same time and it sort of fades away? How our brain works is that an alternative for dopamine are other neurotransmitters like oxytocin, like dopamine, noradrenaline, serotonin. So direct face-to-face contact with other people makes it possible to release the other neurotransmitters naturally, but we need to meet certain conditions. So first of all, we need to be ready to interact with a person, to talk to them, to be interested in what the child or teenager wants to say. We can ask them, so how was your day today? How's your life? As my friend says. Some people like these questions, others detest it, so you have to adapt it to who you are talking to. We can start from ourselves, because we often expect that the children are going to come to us and describe how they feel and so on, but we don't tell them much ourselves, and we cannot tell them how our day was. So it's the first stage of building a good rapport, good relations with people. So far, humanity has not invented anything better than interpersonal relations. This is the best and most natural thing to do. And the second part of your question, I would say that what works very well is creating those good quality home rituals. But we have to look at your child's body language. If we offer to play a board game and the child's body says they don't want to do it, but we've read books and watched TV shows saying that you should play board games with your children, it's going to be counterproductive too. Sometimes you can make sandwiches together, sit down and drink tea, walk the dog together. So do something that both parties feel like doing. This is building relation, this is building contacts, and this is a good competition for the online activities. Maybe it's not a fair fight, but it's worth trying. And after introducing those good rituals, the parents often come back to us as therapists, and they say that all of a sudden then teenagers come to the mom and dad and say, so how are you doing? How was your day? It really works. So I would say it's about the quality of the contact, not the quantity, but quality, also on our side, the adults. I think it's a good point, what you were saying. It's quite valuable. Some things seem pretty simple, but in the family, they're not as simple as they sound. Okay. I wanted to add one more question that we got online. I wanted to comment on what you said. One of the things that work less and less effectively is that we are getting fewer and fewer ideas what to do in our free time. That's my reflection following the discussions with my children when they said, what did you do when you were small, when you didn't have all the technologies? And I started describing them how we were playing those games, you know, racing bottle caps, playing those marble balls, and they were absolutely amazed because the quality of this intergenerational transfer reduced, and they just didn't know all the games that we played in the backyard. So I started collecting ideas from other people. What are the nice ways to spend your free time? And they are available on this platform. There is this website that we have for the youth, pytam.pl. www.edu.pl. So there are healthy ways to manage stress. I've posted them on online, and I think there is 120 items on those lists, and it's like a source of inspiration. Maybe you can pick something from there, maybe not a board game necessarily, but maybe there will be something that you fancy together with your children, and the children can do it with their friends. So it's sort of an answer to the question that we've heard before: what can we offer to the children and teenagers? We have another hand, or actually two hands in the air. So first the back of the room, and then we'll have another question from here. Okay, just a quick one from myself about the ideas, what we can offer as an alternative to online activities. I work in the gaming industry, so games are my personal passion too. I'm a parent of two gamers. One of my children is an adult, another is a teenager, a young teenager actually. So I can tell you that it's pretty cool that even if you don't feel like playing together with your children, you don't have the competence, you don't know how the pads and keyboards are working, it's good to walk into the room and ask, can I watch you playing the game? I do this regularly, and if you work with children or if you are a parent yourself, it does phenomenal things. Just sit at the back of the room and look, and the child will start telling you why they like this game, and then you can go out together and buy some clothes to make some cosplay, to play together and do something offline. So that's my tip, how to start a conversation. You as a parent have to try and go into the virtual world. Thank you. Thank you very much for the comment. Okay, and I have another idea. Teenagers are very social. They want to fight for a better tomorrow. So you can involve them socially in an area that's interesting to them. As parents, we know what they're most interested in, be it health or environment protection. As we have been saying from the beginning, as parents, we have to be involved in any way, create a peer group or show to the teenagers that there are some offline groups that do something good for others. Teenagers love it. Thank you. Thanks a lot for that comment. Let me just remind you about the Digital Youth Forum, the event that we organize in May or June, and we invite young people who fight for some important issues to inspire others. Yeah, we have another question. I worked in a daycare center, and in our community we have such daycare centers in every village, and in each of them we have computers. We have 5 computers in mine, and I've been working there for 4 years, and on the first day when I came there, the children just rushed to the computers, but they have not touched them ever since. Only if they want to print something, they would use a computer. Because I take a lot of ideas. I take balls, I take bicycles, I take drawing paper. I use some sexual education materials, and I tell them, so you choose what we are working on. Everything I present, everything I offer to them is something that we've done, and they still are full of ideas. Thank you very much. As we can see, there are so many ideas and activities that we could do. Let's take the last question from the back of the room because our time is running out. So a question or a comment, please.
Thank you so much. My name is Lydia, and I would like to ask the question to the gentleman representing NASK. I remember you talking about important subjects
a że jak rozumiem, jakby też doświadczenie zawodowe państwa
between parents and between children.
internetu.
I think that you have the expertise, and my question is how to address important topics like looking for the sense of life, how to get through with these topics to our teenagers. That will be the last question. That was the last question, actually. But those of you who didn't manage to ask a question, I would like to inform you that tomorrow's Q&A session will be an open one, and you'll have a second chance. So, correct me if I heard wrong.
Jak dziecko wychować, jak mu ten sens życia. Ja mam taką...
How to discuss, for instance, the sense of life.
Wierzę ekspertom.
Well, look, don't believe experts. You know your child best. And you, as the mother, will find the way. So, when it comes to my kids, it's scouting. When it comes to other kids, the means of passing the message across or discussing things with the child will be different. So don't listen to experts. Fair enough. Let's finish with that. So I guess that we can comment on that with the fact that we as experts shouldn't give universal advice. And ladies and gentlemen, with that, I invite you to tomorrow's discussions, and now within 15 minutes to watch a documentary movie screened out.